Thank you. My name's Daniel Vincent McGonigle III, as it says on the book that's over on the table there, Execute the Laws. It's my third year at camp, 2012, 2013, and this year. And I worked for about 30 years in the building and construction industry. Took an early retirement. I was injured on the Big Dig. For those of you from the area, you know what the Big Dig is. Like Hal said, Dr. Edwin Vera Jr. is the top constitutional scholar in the country, in my opinion, far and away. He wrote a book on constitutional money called Pieces of Eight, 1,700 pages, and he's written recently The Sword and Sovereignty on Constitutional Enforcement Security, 2,300 pages. That's not in paper form, that's on a CD. And he's sort of a mentor of mine, informal mentor, and I basically agree with everything he's written. And so that's where I'm coming from. And I have a lot of experience lobbying at the State House, so I know how you can get things done once you know what needs to be done. So with that, I regularly post short articles in the blog section of the camp's website, and I also post regularly at my own blog, enforceourconstitution.com. My first book, Execute the Laws to Restore the Republic, is published by Camp Constitution Press. I've recently secured the domains committeeofcorrespondence.org and committeesofsafety.org. Safety was recently transferred from a good friend of mine who is going to focus strictly on constitutional money. And these websites will be based on the 1772 and 1774, respectively, historical precedents to assist the people today in reasserting their superseding rights, duties, and powers in their community. As you shall see in this presentation, the phrase, execute the laws, is a most important power and mandate enumerated in our Constitution for the United States of America. This subject matter is very important because it is my opinion, and also that of top constitutional scholars, that if we do not restore constitutional enforcement in order to restore our constitutional republic, we will very likely at some unknown point in the future lose our republic. Enforcing the Constitution requires applying authority, duty, and power to the three big words in the upper left corner. There they are. That's the photograph of the document at the archives.gov website and in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. When people can, number one, know and take the moral, spiritual high ground. And number two, know and take the constitutional high ground, that is all that you will need. You'll be on your way to participate actively in spiritual and political American society. Enforcing the Constitution is not just about exercising individual rights or individual liberty. Enforcing the Constitution is about participating as part of we the people and instructing your elected officials in the mandated execution of their enumerated duty and powers in order to protect and defend the free exercise of people's individual rights and individual liberty. Prerequisite, and I'm in full agreement with the Great Reverend Stephen Kraft. This presentation is geared towards people who get and keep their moral, spiritual house in good order. We need to bring in the good side of spiritual warfare in the fight against evil and against, quoting George Washington, unprincipled men who seek to subvert the power of the people and to usurp or take for themselves the reins of government. That's from your copy of the farewell address that was talked about earlier by Pastor Lear. Let's start with pointing out some key phrases and clauses in the 1776 Declaration. Here's the Declaration, archives.gov website, National Archives in D.C. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people, and I've skipped over, and I've underlined main words, and I've skipped over a few other words, so it makes more sense for this presentation. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, them being one people. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they, the one people, should declare the causes which impel them. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they, men and women, are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that, these important words here, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Now, anywhere I say men, obviously, I mean men and women in today's day. Under the laws of, quote, under the laws of nature and nature's God, natural rights are God-given rights that exist in nature. Endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, gets you to God-given rights. Unalienable, which is also used interchangeably with inalienable, means not transferable, non-transferable, or cannot be transferred to someone else. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Okay, that there is confirmation and proof of this important point. The supreme and superseding authority of one people, i.e., in other words, the superseding authority of we the people, second only to the laws of nature and nature's God. So, our government derives its just powers from the consent of us, the governed, i.e., from the consent of we the people. So I'm taking words from the first three words from the Constitution, applying it to the Declaration. All right, continuing in the Declaration, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing, important word, organizing its powers, another important word, in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Okay, the quote, it is the right of the people and it is their right, it is their duty, again confirms and proves the superseding authority of we the people. The corollary to duty to provide and security in the Declaration can be found in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. The Congress shall have power to provide for the common defense. And in the Bill of Rights, Amendment 2, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. First half of the Second Amendment. Today, in the early 21st century, we don't want to alter or abolish government. And we don't want to institute a new government, as stated in the 1776 Declaration. Today, we do want to restore the function and performance of the existing government, as designed and enumerated, a constitutional republic confirmed at Article 4, Section 4. And that's in your Constitution on page 15, where it talks about the Republican form of government. So that's the proof that we are a republic. A second confirmation and proof of the people's, one people, in other words, supreme and superseding authority is in the Constitution's preamble. We the people do ordain and establish this Constitution. So we are the creators of that document. 20th to early 21st century constitutional history. The execution or performance of the powers and restrictions of our Constitution, Bill of Rights, and constitutional laws have not been and are not being enforced. The Constitution has in fact been largely unenforced since the early 20th century. The lack of following moral, spiritual principles, ignoring the rule of constitutional law, and the lack of necessary constitutional enforcement has allowed the proliferation of major problems in American society. Individuals working in government with constitutional responsibility have, for the most part, been abdicating or refusing to do their duty, the duty that is stipulated in the oath they take to support and defend the Constitution. So that's both elected and appointed officials all have to take an oath. Early 20th century violations. The ability for necessary or emergency enforcement of the Constitution was disbanded a century ago, beginning in 1903, by federal and state statutes, which I call alleged laws, repugnant to the Constitution, unconstitutional. Mrs. Chris Ann Hall spoke previously, as you know, about the word repugnant. Webster's 1828, repugnant, opposite, contrary, inconsistent. Every sin is repugnant to the will of God. Therefore, the necessity for people today in the early 21st century is, number one, to take the moral spiritual high ground, Reverend Kraft. And number two, to take the constitutional high ground. That's from Dr. Edwin Vieira Jr. We the people, the superseding authority, can and must assert these true American principles to utilize the principles for their own instructions to their elected officials, and in order to promote and facilitate achievement of necessary constitutional restoration. Being grounded in sound moral spiritual principles as stated, and then, in order to understand the necessity to return to constitutional enforcement and then constitutional restoration from the enforcement, let's get into the nuts and bolts of the Constitution and dissect the specific execution and security clauses, thereby shining light on the solutions that are available as enumerated in the Constitution itself. Okay, a couple of more definitions from Webster's first. Webster's 1828, enforce, to compel, to constrain, to force, to put into execution. Here you see the juxtaposition between the word enforce and execution, and execute. To cause to take effect, as to enforce the laws. Definition of execute, Webster's 1828, literally to follow out or through, hence to perform, to do, to effect, to carry into complete effect, to complete, to finish. We execute a purpose, a plan, design, or scheme. We execute a work undertaken, that is, we pursue it to the end. The laws. Now this is an important area in Article 6 in the Constitution on page 15 and 16. Article 6, page 15 and 16. The laws in their totality, as specified in the Constitution, consist of what? Can anybody say anything about, beyond the word laws, what they think laws would include, beyond the word laws? Go ahead. God's superior to man's laws. God's laws are superior. So the word laws in the Constitution does not include that. Well, we'll get to, it's in Article 6, and I'll show it right to you. The answer in constitutional definition is in Article 6. Good try, though. U.S. Constitution, Article 6, Clause 2. page 15 and 16. And I've bolded and underlined specific words to make it easier to understand. This Constitution and the laws which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and I'm going to skip the treaties part, shall be the supreme law of the land, or just shall be the supreme law. Read that again. This Constitution and the laws which shall be made in pursuance thereof shall be the supreme law. Laws made in pursuance thereof means laws made in pursuance of the Constitution. Then it says, this Constitution in these good laws shall be the supreme law. This Constitution includes the original 1787 Constitution, the Bill of Rights and Amendments. Therefore, the phrase in the Constitution, the laws in the Constitution, includes the original 1787 Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the amendments, and constitutional laws made in pursuance thereof. So the laws means the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, constitutional laws made in pursuance thereof. And so that it when we talk about enforcing or executing the laws, we're talking about enforcing or executing the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, amendments, and all constitutional laws. By definition, constitutional means made in pursuance of the Constitution. Any questions on that? Okay, good. Treaties are not important to the subject matter, but what is important is that laws and treaties are equivalent to each other. In other words, Congress can pass a law to overrule a treaty, and the President can make a treaty to overrule a law. I'm talking about a law passed by Congress, not the laws in the Constitution, including the Constitution. It's a little confusing, but here when I'm talking about the laws, I'm talking about strictly a law passed by Congress. Okay, so laws and treaties are made equal to each other. Laws and treaties are both subordinate to and superseded by the Constitution. So the laws made in pursuance of the Constitution are superseded by the Constitution. I know it's a little confusing, but you'll understand it further when I get into the enforcement and execution. Okay, a couple more definitions. Black's Law, 1910. Black's Law Dictionary, 1910. Color of law. Now this comes from a U.S. Supreme Court case. And when you're reading legal language, when you see U.S., that means that this was a case, somebody versus somebody. That this U.S. means that's a U.S. Supreme Court case. Color of law, the appearance or semblance without the substance of legal right. So it's the appearance, but without the substance of legal right. Color of law. Okay, Bouvier's Law Dictionary, 1856. Unconstitutional, that which is contrary to the Constitution. When an act of the legislature is, there's the word again, repugnant, or contrary to the Constitution, it is ipso facto void. Ipso facto, the Latin meaning, by the fact itself, by the very nature of the deed. Ipso facto. Okay, if any law passed by the legislative branch that is not made in pursuance of this Constitution, then the alleged law that is repugnant to the Constitution is commonly referred to as color of law and pretended by government or unprincipled men in government to be law, until in rare cases it is declared unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court. Remember from last year, the class I taught, Frederick Bastiat in his 1850 book, The Law, and we have that here on the table. I recommend this to everybody. Bastiat called alleged laws or pretend laws a perversion of the law. Another couple of definitions from Webster's 1828. Common, and this is, I'm going to be talking about common and collective defense. Common, general, serving for the use of all, universal, belonging to all. Definition of collective, not talking about communism, but collective, the adjective, formed by gathering, gathered into a mass, sum, or body, congregated, in grammar expressing a number of multitude united as a collective noun or name, which through in the singular number itself denotes more than one, as company, army, troop, assembly. Defense. The earliest spelling in the Constitution is D-E-F-E-N-C-E. They changed the C to an S in the early 1800s. Story's 1833 commentaries on the Constitution, he spells it with an S. So you get an idea of when they changed that. Webster's definition of defense: anything that opposes attack, violence, danger, or injury, anything that secures the person, the rights or the possessions of men, fortification, guard, protection, security. Definition of liberty. Probably all familiar with this one, I think. Freedom from restraint in a general sense and applicable to the body or the will or mind. Civil, now there's many types of, there's natural liberty, there's other types of, there's political liberty. I picked out here another one. Civil liberty is the liberty of men in a state of society, only abridged and restrained as is necessary and expedient for the safety and interest of the society, state, or nation. A restraint of natural liberty, unnecessary for the public, as mentioned above, would be tyranny or oppression. Okay, this is Frederick Bastiat, again, last year. Each of us has a natural right from God to defend his person, his liberty, and his property. Frederick Bastiat was a French political economist. The authorized duty and power to collectively defend the rights of the people was Bastiat's general description of the law. Those here last year at Camp Constitution 2013 will remember that 19th century political economist Frederick Bastiat defined the law as the collective defense of life, liberty, and property that is derived from the combination of all people's individual rights to self-defense of life, liberty, and property. There's Samuel Adams. Samuel Adams, Committee of Correspondence report to the Boston Town Meeting, 1772. The Rights of the Colonists report, which the committee's report was titled, declared that, quote, government was instituted for the purposes of common defense. The grand end of civil, end means purpose. The grand end of civil government is for the support, protection, and defense of life, liberty, and property. In comparing Frederick Bastiat with Samuel Adams, we can determine that the definition of the law is the same as the end or purpose of government, and vice versa. Previously heard Mr. Tom Moore speak on the word union. Okay, this is from the Constitution. Preamble, which we recite at the flag raising in the morning. This is page 1 in your pocket Constitution. We the people, and I'm going to skip parts to emphasize subject matter I'm talking about here. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, provide for the common defense, and do ordain and establish this Constitution. So, what I'm highlighting by bolding is more perfect union, purpose to provide for the common defense, and the superseding authority, we the people do ordain and establish this Constitution. I.e., at the bottom, we the people do is, another, I changed the words around using the same words. We the people do ordain and establish this Constitution in order to provide for the common defense. Confirming again, as with the 1776 Declaration, is that we the people, as a single unit, do ordain and establish this Constitution, and again are therefore the superseding and supreme authority second only to God. The first national government formed after the Continental Congress that began in 1774 was the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union. Therefore, by the government created by this Constitution, ordained and established by we the people, was formed a more perfect union than the previous Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union. But this applies to today. This more perfect Constitution needs enforcement that is not being performed. Now, to the importance of the composition of the laws, which I spoke of earlier, and who executes the laws, including constitutional enforcement. Now, this is the U.S. Constitution, Article 2, about the President, going to Section 3, page 12 in your Constitution. He shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. The President is mandated to take care that the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and constitutional laws are faithfully executed. Unfortunately, this has not been happening. U.S. Constitution, Article 1, this is congressional powers. Clause 15. Okay, I'd like everybody to open the Constitution to page 7 and get a hold of your ink pen. Just want you to write a number in a certain place. The clauses in this Constitution, this part Constitution, are not numbered, but there's room in front of the word to. The word, each clause begins with the word to on page 7. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 clauses down. The fourth to. It begins to provide for calling forth the militia. To the left of 2, write the number 15. That's the 15th clause in Section 8. Write the number 15 because this is, you'll see, it's a very important clause. That's for your future reference. Okay, 15 says, to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. To get an idea of what an insurrection may or may not be, one of the definitions of insurrection is rebellion, and the Union, and during the Civil War, they considered the South to be an insurrection or rebellion. Okay, Clause 15 is the main enforcement clause of the Constitution. This clause is more powerful than the President's duty to faithfully execute the laws. This clause is more powerful. And you'll see why in a few minutes. Especially the phrase, call forth the militia to execute the laws. Clause 15 is necessary for when the executive branch fails to faithfully execute the laws, when there's an emergency such as a natural or man-made disaster, such as western wildfires, Midwest tornadoes, southeast and northeast hurricanes, or when necessary to the security of a free state. That's from the Second Amendment. The well-regulated militia necessary to the security means the militia will render certain the common defense of life, liberty, and property, which we heard from Samuel Adams and Frederick Bastiat. And before that, it was John Locke and Thomas Hobbes. And for those of you that are going to go on to undergraduate when you're out of secondary school, and in your freshman year, if you take Poli-Sci 101, first thing you'll get into will be Thomas Hobbes, who wrote the Leviathan, and John Locke, his important book was Second Treatise on Civil Government. They both spoke about the defense, common defense of life, liberty, and property. The militia, to repel invasions, also includes, by definition, to repel infringements, such as violations of the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So, if every person in the country who was able-bodied between the ages of 18 and 50 who had a rank in a local command structure and belonged to the local militia to be called forth in any emergency. And some legislator proposed some gun control legislation at any state house of the 50 states that gun control would be infringing the second half of the Second Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So it says the militia to repel invasions or infringements. So what would happen? What would happen to that legislator if he proposed that piece of legislation? Filed it, sponsored it, put his name on it. What do you think the militia, who are composed of we the people, what would they do? They'd be getting very serious with that man. He probably could end up in chrome bracelets. And because this is very serious business. And all gun control is, in my opinion, very unconstitutional. Okay, it's the word invasion from Webster's 1828 again. A hostile entrance into the possessions of another, where you can match it up with the word infringement. Hostile entrance into the possessions of another, particularly the entrance of a hostile army into a country for the purpose of conquest or plunder, or the attack of a military force. Second part of the definition, an attack on the rights of another, infringement or violation. So that's why I, using Noah Webster, 1828, to match up infringement with invasion. The definition of several, okay. And Hal has talked to me about this word too, the word several. In the phrases, the people of the several states, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 1, and the militia of the several states, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1. The word several originally meant 13 states, 13 original states. Today, obviously, it means the 50 states. So whenever you see the word several, it means however many states there are. Before 1959, there were 48 several states. Okay, Article 2, U.S. Constitution, Article 2, back to the President again, Section 2. We're going to get into the word several here. The President, page 11 in your pocket Constitution, Clause 1, Section 2, Clause 1, Article 2, the President. The President shall be Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states when the militia is called into the actual service of the United States. In other words, if there was a national emergency, the President can call forth the militia, the state militia, the 50 state militias, into service for the defense of the United States. Key point here is the militia are of the several states and not of the United States. Therefore, the militia are state institutions originally intended and are mandated to be composed of the whole body of the people and are not a department in the federal government. There's a Department of the Army, Department of the Navy, Department of the Air Force, Department of the Marines, but they're part of the Navy. So, but there is no Department of the Militia in federal government. Who composes and what is, according to enumeration and definition, well-regulated militia of the states that have the Clause 15 enumerated power to execute the laws of the Union when necessary to the security of a free state. Who composes what is? Okay. I'm going to ask you a question after I tell you who composes the militia, which I mentioned a little bit before. Okay, this is Virginia Constitution. They wrote the first Declaration of Rights in 1776, in June, a month before the Declaration of Independence. And now it's still in the Virginia Constitution of the whole. Section 13, that a well-regulated militia, answering your question, composed of the body of the people. Trained to arms is the proper natural and safe defense of a free state. That standing armies in time of peace should be avoided as dangerous to liberty, and that in all cases, and this is important, the military should be under strict subordination to and governed by the civil power. So could martial law be implemented on the people without the support of the governor or without the support of the mayor? Could they implement martial law in an emergency without their support? No. The military should always be strict subordination to the civil power. In martial law, that's military law. It's the same thing. Okay, the body of the people. What is the body of the people? Regular militia composed of the body of the people. The body of the people means all the able-bodied people. And they had various age restrictions in the New England Confederation of 1643. It was between the ages of 16 and 60, between the ages of 16 and 60. But it changes 18 to 45, 17 to 50, depends on the time and the state. Webster's 1828 again. Here's his definition of militia. It fits perfectly with the Constitution and the statutes in the colonies and states before the Constitution, because the militia has been around since the 1630s. Militia, the body of soldiers in a state enrolled for discipline but not engaged in actual service except in emergencies, as distinguished from regular troops whose sole occupation is war or military service. The militia of a country are the able-bodied men organized, today it would be men and women, organized into companies, regiments, brigades. Everyone would have a rank with officers of all grades and required by law to attend military exercises on certain days only during the year, but at other times left to pursue the usual occupations. Quotes from a few of the founders. I asked, sir, what is the militia? It is the whole people, except for a few public officials. George Mason, co-author of the Second Amendment, in the Virginia Convention debates on ratifying the Constitution, 1788. Here's another quote. What, sir, is the use of the militia? It is to prevent the establishment of a standing army, the bane of liberty. Whenever governments mean to invade the rights, there's invade where it means the same as infringe. Whenever governments mean to invade the rights and liberties of the people, they always attempt to destroy the militia in order to raise an army upon their ruins. Rep. Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts. He was one of the original delegates to Continental Congress. And that was during a floor debate in Congress over the Second Amendment, 1789. Now that debate, there was, the Bill of Rights were proposed in Congress by resolution. So that debate followed that resolution, and the debate would be before they voted on the resolution to pass the Bill of Rights, or to vote on the Bill of Rights, and then it would go on to ratification to the states if it passed Congress, which it did. U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8. These are the congressional powers. Clause 16, which follows the one that you wrote in there, 15. Now, Clause 15 was about the execution or enforcement, and Clause 16 is about organizing, about command structure. To provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, that's similar to when I talked about the president and the militia of the several states may be called into the actual service of the United States. Reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. Now, Congress prescribes the rules for discipline so that they're uniform across state lines. There's John Parker, I think, when did camp go to Lexington Green, Hal? 2 years ago? Okay, so those of you who were here 2 years ago, and others may have seen the statue, the great statue of John Parker, captain of the Lexington Militia Company, April 19th, at the time, April 19th, 1775. Here's a painting that I think many of you have not seen. It's a recent painting. The title is Lexington Common on the 19th of April, 1775. This is by historical artist Don Troy Arney. And you can see this painting online, and when you see it enlarged, the detail is very good. And Don Troy Arney, historical artist, he's known for being highly accurate with the the uniforms, and so forth, with all his different historical paintings. And I'm guessing that the man in the middle with the white strap around his shoulder, that may be perceived to be John Parker. Okay, U.S. statutes at large. These are federal laws. When, if you go on the internet and you look up a federal law, it usually takes you to the U.S. Code. The U.S. Code began in 1875, but when a law is originally passed by Congress, it's printed in something called the U.S. Statutes at Large, and that's where I've been doing my research. This is the Militia Act. This is an excerpt from the Militia Act of May 2nd, 1792. The title is An Act to Provide for Calling Forth the Militia to Execute the Laws of the Union, Suppress Insurrections, and Repel Invasions. Almost the exact same language as the Constitutional Clause 15. Now, I've selected here Section 2, that whenever the laws of the United States shall be opposed or the execution thereof obstructed in any state by combinations too powerful to be suppressed by the ordinary course of judicial proceedings, or too powerful to be suppressed by the powers vested in the federal marshals by this act, it shall be lawful for the President to call forth the militia of such state to suppress such combinations and to cause the laws to be duly executed. Okay, this continuing with the May 2nd Militia Act. This is Section 9. Now, marshals and sheriffs used to have much more power than they have today. But in the 18th and 19th century, they had civil power to execute the laws. Here's Section 9, that the marshals of the several districts, the federal districts, and their deputies shall have the same powers in executing the laws of the United States as sheriffs and the deputies in the several states have by law in executing the laws of their respective states. So the marshals can enforce federal laws and the sheriffs can enforce state laws. The Militia Act of May 8th, 6 days later, specified militia organization and command structure according to Clause 16. Militia Act 1861, around the beginning of the Civil War, included the same language as the May 2nd Act with respect to the power of the militia to enforce the faithful execution of the laws. But, the 1861 Act added some unconstitutional language that enumerated those same execution of the law's powers to the land and naval forces of the United States. Now remember, when I was talking about Article 2, the president's powers, he's the Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States, and when the militia is called forth, he's Commander-in-Chief of the militia of the several states. Well, here we have, he's given the same execution of the law's powers to the Army and the Navy. So that's definitely unconstitutional, and I've been just given the word 5 minutes, so I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to the conclusion. Military Act 1903. Basically, in 1903, they made the National Guard, they created the National Guard, made them the organized militia, and disbanded all the able-bodied people from the militia. So the organized militia was now to be composed of a tiny fraction of the people who happen to belong to the National Guard. And that's highly unconstitutional. The militia is supposed to be composed of the whole body of the people. So it disbanded the body of the people, relegated the able-bodied people to a constitutionally unorganized entity called the reserve militia, then the oxymoron, the unorganized militia, which is nowhere in the Constitution, contrary to Clause 16 and the definition of militia. So what's the enforcement status of the execution? What is the enforcement status today of the execution of our Constitution, a Bill of Rights, and constitutional laws? The laws in their totality are not being enforced. From slide 13 here on this presentation, the lack of following moral and spiritual principles, ignoring the rule of constitutional law, and the lack of necessary constitutional enforcement has allowed the proliferation of major problems in American society. From slide 3, The subject matter is very important because it is my opinion that if we do not restore constitutional enforcement, we very likely at some point in the future lose our republic. So, how do we restore constitutional enforcement? According to moral, spiritual principles and enumerated constitutional principles. Make sure your moral, spiritual house is in good order, as aforesaid. Keep learning constitutional principles, keep coming to Camp Constitution, and take the high ground, as aforesaid. I agree with the assertion by Dr. Edwin Vieira Jr. that we the people and the militia are branches of government in addition to legislative, executive, and judicial. It makes sense since we the people are the superseding and supreme authority, second only to God. The Declaration of the Constitution allows for we the people, the sovereign. Since the king is not in charge, we the people in charge. The king is not the sovereign, we the people are the sovereign. To make necessary changes in emergencies. We must instruct our state legislators to revitalize the Constitution's execution and security clauses. We must exhaust those available political remedies beyond just elections. We can, in the near future, organize our own official committees of correspondence. Now, I mentioned in the beginning that I've secured a domain. I'm going to have a website. It'll have 50 affiliates of the 50 states. I will lead the way in the future with my new website. People can then publish official reports following in the precedent of Samuel Adams in 1772 when the Boston Committee of Correspondence published their report, which is sort of an early version of the Declaration of Independence. Camp Constitution is a good preparation for future leaders. Encourage others any age to come to Camp Constitution. Before turning 18, keep learning the subject matter material. Encourage young adults 18 plus to join future local committees of correspondence or form your own committee in your neighborhood. When you turn 18, you can do the same and begin exercising your full American rights, duties, and powers. 18-year-olds can become state legislators, which in most states is a part-time job. When you guys turn 18, you should be able and prepared to hit the ground running, so to speak, regarding active participation as adults in American spiritual and political society. I'll end with something I composed earlier today. In the absence of light, darkness prevails, whereas in the presence of light, darkness fails and light prevails. Thank you.